All right, folks, we are back again, and I am very excited about what is upcoming, as I am excited about everything that we've already seen today. It's been a fantastic day, and it was with great pleasure that I introduce our next program, which is our capstone speaker, Frankie Flood, with Connecting Craft with Community. And this couple of days has already been so connected to community that I'm very excited to kind of put a lid on everything with this. Frankie Flood's interest in machines and tools and the influence of his working class upbringing act as a source of inspiration for the functional objects that he creates. Flood exhibits his work nationally and internationally, and his work has received many awards and been published widely. The potential that craft has to serve local and global communities through design and fabrication has been the focus of Flood's recent research, as he continues to combine traditional craft practice with digital technology. His recent research regarding 3D printed prosthetics and one-of-a-kind adaptive devices has spread worldwide, and his creation of the Digital Craft Research Lab has created new areas of study for students interested in digital fabrication and metalsmithing. Flood's talk today will focus on his research in digital craft and ways in which he and his students have created bespoke objects to assist people in their daily lives. It is so great to have you here, Frankie. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'm gonna go ahead and start screen share.
Go for it. And while you're doing that, just a reminder, folks, there will be a Q&A at the end of this. So please do post your questions either in Hopin or Zoom, and I will level them up to Frankie when we're ready.
Thanks, Alex. Is this showing up okay?
Yep, looks great.
All right, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Alex, again, and thank you, Kat, for specifically asking me, and Snag for inviting me to speak. It's a great honor. I attended my first conference about, I think, exactly 20 years ago. So it's a great honor to be able to do this talk. So again, Kat asked me when I first, was invited if I could talk about aspiration, and basically defined aspiration as a hope or ambition of achieving something. And I thought for a while on this topic, and it started to really make me think a lot about the goals of Sloyd education, and that is to instill a taste for an appreciation of work in general, to create a respect for hard, honest physical labor, to develop independence and self-reliance, and to provide training in the habits of order, accuracy, cleanliness, and neatness, to train the eye to see accurately and appreciate the sense of beauty and function, and then to develop a sense of touch and give general dexterity to the hand, and to instill habits of attention, industry, perseverance, and patience, and to promote the development of a body's physical powers, and to acquire dexterity in the use of tools, and to execute work and to produce useful products. This is by Otto Solomon from 1900. And this kind of resonates for me, but I grew up in a small rural community. My father was a blue collar factory worker, worked at a printing factory. And from a young age, I had a real draw to machinery, specifically motorcycles. My father had always ridden motorcycles. And that was just kind of something as a little kid that I was enthralled with. But the most important aspect of my father's influence in that small community was the fact that when he wasn't working, he was always building something at home. I remember playing percussion in band, and we didn't have modern style harnesses for our drums. And so he was like, well, I can make one. And so he made one. And when I was small, everybody showed up to school with a yo-yo, and, it was a Duncan yo-yo that they purchased. And my dad's like, well, I can make you one. And so he used a drill press. It's kind of like a modified lathe, and built me one. And so I was kind of used to just always having him have this influence of, well, we can figure it out. We can figure out how to build whatever it is. And I think that came in large part due to the fact that he had grown up on a farm. And I frequently would, again, be drawn to this particular tractor. It's a Alice Chalmers WD-45. And thinking back now on riding on, there's a small toolbox that sits on the left-hand side there at the rear of the tractor. And I would sit on that toolbox as a little kid, as my dad would help my grandfather farm. And Again, the smells of that tractor, the way it sounded, the way it looked, there was an aesthetic that I was just completely drawn to. And that would continue as I went through college and put myself through college. I was first generation college student, and I worked a factory job. I worked second shift through undergrad, and then later on would work in between in summers. And there was something about working on an assembly line. In my particular case, I worked both at a printing factory at first, where my father worked, and then later on at a tool and die and spinning, metal spinning, deep draw forming, powder coating, injection molding facility where I built things on an assembly line. And eventually I wound up finding myself, headed to graduate school. And really, this talk's a little bit different than I want to give recognition to those that have impacted my life. And my first was my metals professor in undergrad, David Griffin. And then later on, my graduate professor, Billy Thide. And Billy has been a very active member of SNAG, and she was who first introduced me to SNAG. And I she started asking me questions up until the point that I had entered into graduate school. I'd been making jewelry, and she kept asking me, what is it about jewelry? And really I came to realize it was function. I made this first pizza cutter while I was in graduate school called Easy Rider. And I continued to make more pizza cutters. This was PFL, Pizza for Life. And again, this was kind of a response to being a student and thinking about what's an object that resonates for me. And at the time I was poor and eating a lot of frozen pizza. And so, it just kind of came naturally that this would be an object that I would create, and thinking about, traditions of functional objects within our field. And so this is Fat Boy. It's aluminum, carbon fiber, powder coated. PFL Mantis, another powder coated in aluminum with stainless steel blade. This is Psycho Pizza Cadillac, a hubless design. So this is actually, you can see through the wheel. And this is where I started to make most all of the components, even the small threaded components myself. And I was teaching myself machining and really trying to figure out how I could scale down industrial processes to my studio kind of scale level. So I was powder coating, started powder coating pretty early on, and using the Eastwood Company's hot coat system, and started experimenting with mixing in metal flake into the powders and doing things like that. And again, this was just a time of extreme growth for me. And a lot of that stemmed from, Billy's influence and then introducing me to the SNAG world. And the culmination of my time there at the U of I at Champaign-Urbana resulted in a series of pizza cutters and and then a chopper motorcycle that I built within the last, I think it was about a semester and a half that I built that. And so I got out of school, and I during school I had taught, and I really fell in love with teaching. There was just something about the sense of community. I was fortunate that I had went to school with some fabulous makers that also influenced me. Brookmark Swanson was a huge influence on me. Later on, within my cohort, I had Hey Young Suh, Ian Bali, and then Natalia Penchuk that was in the cohort behind me. And so when I got out, I felt kind of lost. It was like, now what? And I wound up getting a job actually it was local to Champaign-Urbana. I was in Rantoul, Illinois, just up the road. And it's a place called Taylor Studios. And what they did is they designed Natural History Museum exhibits. And I didn't even know this was an option or existed in terms of being able to use my creative talents to create things. And so I was first hired to be a welder there. They saw the chopper motorcycle and brought me in and said, can you weld these things? And I was terrified, but I also had a child on the way and needed insurance. And I said, yeah, I think I can do this. And so this was a space center that I actually built all the exhibits for. It was a game table, these large steel welded structures that depict different planets. And then also interactive. So I started making a lot of interactives for that company where, children would come into a museum, they would pull on the rope, they could actually see what a bowling ball would weigh on Earth or on Jupiter or Pluto, et cetera. And so we would have to figure out how to like move these things into the space, how to break them down, how to rebuild them once we got there. Everything was built in our shops and everything was built from scratch. And every day was a different project, essentially. There was always something new. You never did the same thing twice. And I also did artifact mounts there. So working with like the Field Museum, we would be subcontracted sometimes to do work for them. And then we also traveled. We had traveled all over the country to install these. And it was a real eye opener. At the time, I didn't realize, but I was figuring out ways that I could use my metalsmithing skills and problem solving abilities to be able to make an impact at that company. So I again, as I mentioned earlier, I fell in love with teaching. And I kept applying for teaching positions and eventually landed a job at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I was teaching both foundations and metalsmithing. And what I came to realize is how important it was for me as a faculty member with my colleague, Yevgenia Kaganovich, to build a sense of community within our program. And I'm eternally grateful to Yevgenia for having faith in me and allowing me to explore a lot of different things. I developed a class called Industrial Processes there. And I also had the opportunity to work with a lot of fabulous makers from our community. Jennifer Harris was one, Jennifer Pollock Harris, Stacy Lee Weber, Tia Dale, and again, the influence that they had on me and that the students also had on me, and that sense of community that we had there was phenomenal. And those people became like family. Here Yev's holding my second born. Again, we were building something special, and it felt amazing. And I am, again, so thankful for that. And I also felt like I kind of got a second graduate school experience because I started by teaching in sculpture or teaching in foundations. I came in contact with an individual named Charles Krause or Chuck Krause, who was taught foundry in Milwaukee for 40 years. And Chuck had also had children. And so he really took me under his wing. He taught me everything he knew about foundry, which is immense after 40 years of teaching. And again, supported me through the tenure process in such a large way that I will never be able to repay him for everything that he did. So again, this entire time, like I'm probably not as aware of community as I am now. I was just kind of experiencing these different opportunities, and my community started to expand within that local region of Milwaukee. Milwaukee's obviously an urban institution, but it is small enough that you can, I think, have a voice within the city. A lot of artists exhibit and have had very successful careers there. But the chancellor of the university, we had a new chancellor come. Michael Lovell had come to be our new chancellor. And he had asked if the art faculty would design a new medallion to be able to be a part of the inauguration ceremony that he was going to go through. And so I designed this particular medallion where there was a map of campus that was three-dimensionalized, and you would rotate it, and then it would open up this camera iris eye that had the UWM logo, and then his name would be revealed in the back of it. So we went in for some meetings, and I actually had some CAD models that I'd done ahead of time, and he was basically like, yeah, create it. And so I did that. We worked with students, Rachel Kettinger, Brian Sarah, Eric Darbo, and and then again, Yev, and we all worked on this to be able to complete this piece. What was really amazing is the fact that in the creation of this, there was a videographer team that videoed the steps of it, and there's a link to it you can actually go to later on if you want to. But they actually used that video as a part of that ceremony that was done there at UWM. And it was one of the times where I really felt like, we talk about jewelry having significance, and we talk about the meaning that it can, have. And it was really an eye-opener to see all these other faculty members from other departments, and also to see public officials. Our governor was there, and to see this object be at the center of the ceremony. And then later on to hear from people like, wow, how cool or how amazing that was. And I really felt like there was becoming an awareness of what was happening within our department, what was happening within the school. I was also asked to do the podium medallion for the podium, and then also that whole auditorium had been remodeled, so I had been asked to do acoustic vent covers for the new building. It was like 240 acoustic covers. So again, I was getting tapped for all these kind of like opportunities to kind of showcase what it was that we were doing. And so later on, the chancellor asked for me to make donor gifts for any donor that donated $1 million to university. So I did a series of those that were based on the medallion and would be engraved with the donor's name on the back with a commemorative box. And again, it was something where I really felt like there was an appreciation. A lot of times I think at universities, the arts kind of get, shoved to the side, and people don't really appreciate or value or, know what role that the arts can play within our world. And that chancellor, Michael Lovell, wound up leaving after about 5 years. And then our new chancellor came in and they asked me again to do the new medallion. And so this one had a map of the lake shore that was laser engraved, and it became a water chamber where I put water from Lake Michigan into it. And it had a little porthole cover on the front you could take off, and it kind of magnified the map through the water. And then so we made that piece, and they also did a video of it also to kind of document the process of it being made also. And this is also the current chancellor, Mike Money, who still wears this at every function that is a official function for UWM. During this time, I was also experimenting with 3D printing. I had talked to various members of my faculty and my chair, and was interested in getting into 3D printing and digital technology. And there was very little support in the beginning because I didn't really know what role 3D printing would play within our school. And so I started building 3D printers. There was very little interest, and started making these 3D printers using open source plans. And another thing that I did was I started these meetups. We in the city, we basically partnered with Milwaukee Makerspace. There was a maker community was really growing at that time. And we would do these meetups where people could come up to the lab that I'd created, and we could talk about what people were building and share ideas, kind of like those early computer clubs that would start in garages that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were members of. And so it was a really awesome opportunity to engage with the community outside, so they would be able to come in and see what was happening within the walls of the university. And so as this kind of activity grew, I started to also find that there was a broader appreciation for the skills, and there was purpose within the broader community beyond. And I had received a message from this individual. This is Mike Isabella. He basically sent me this an email and said, "Hey, I got a new tattoo. I just opened up a new restaurant in DC called Graffiato, and I got this tattoo to commemorate it." And he said, "Would you make me a pizza cutter?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do that, but I'll make the back half, the handle, look a little bit better than the tattoo artist did, if you don't mind." And so, so I made this pizza cutter for him called Knuckles, and then sent that to him. And it was really great to just be able to see, on Top Chef. He was on this Top Chef show on Bravo, and you could watch the show and then see, there's one of your pieces there. It's pretty amazing. Another impactful moment that kind of started to happen more recently outside was connecting with Boris Bally on an exhibition that he organized called Imagine Peace Now. I have to preface this now. 20 years ago, actually it might have been the second conference I went to. I think it was in San Francisco, maybe. And I was on a gallery crawl with my wife, and we were on a bus going around to galleries, and I wound up running into Boris Bally, I think, Kristen Beeler, Donald Friedlich, and I think, let's see who else, Andy Cooperman, I think. And I was young, and I remember meeting them and what an impact that made on me. They were so complimentary, because I had been in an exhibition, I think in Denver, and they'd seen that Easy Rider Pizza Cutter maybe or something, but they were so complimentary, and it made such a difference in my life. And again, I think this is important. We never know how we're impacting other people through our actions. But I had written a report in an undergraduate metals course, and I had been tasked to go read Metalsmith magazine and write a report on an article. And I happened to flip through, and I saw Boris's work, some of his early flatware, and see his early bracelets. And I was just floored. I'd never seen anything like that. And I was like, this is George. This is amazing. I can't believe this is George. And so again, to meet him was just like, it was like fabulous in the fact that he was complimentary. And so this opportunity came up. Like I said, recently, Boris invited a number of artists to take some guns and that had been decommissioned and from the police department. And I think it was Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, but anyway, he said, let's turn these guns into objects of art to bring an awareness of gun violence. And I was just honored to be invited. So this is my pizza cutter called Peacemaker. It's Peacemaker, PIEC, and then obviously PEAC. But the idea of it being this object that's rendered useless for its original function and now has a secondary function, in this case a pizza cutter. And I decided to take the Pietà and basically digitally, this 3D scan, or isolate Christ and then use that for the handles, and develop this kind of pizza cutter that also could dispense Parmesan cheese through the revolver. So I actually got it back the revolver functioning again, so you could use that, and then made a new barrel that I actually fabricated so it looked like it'd been bent and rendered useless. And again, it was a great honor to be a part of that exhibition. So earlier in Milwaukee, while I was teaching there and teaching in metals, one of my chairs, Leanne Garrison, tasked me with giving me a couple rooms in this old Ford factory, which couldn't have been better for me, right? And that's where my studio was at. And she said, why don't you use these couple rooms and start doing whatever you want with those spaces as far as teaching goes. And so I started teaching in architecture along with art, because a lot of students were they were very digitally savvy, but they didn't know how things actually went together. And we were starting to see this a lot. I think in the siloed kind of aspects of universities, there's very little. Sometimes there's very little hands-on experiences for students. And so this idea of knowledge that you get from personal experience became really impactful. And I started to think a lot about this. And so the health sciences department had come to us because I started this new lab called the Digital Craft Research Lab, and said, we've got this issue where doctors are trying to measure the amount of lockup in a patient who has a spasticity issue. So after they take therapy, we want to be able to measure that and actually get an accurate read on whether or not therapy is working or not. And so my students and I developed this lightweight object that could be put on, it could be adjustable, and then we could actually measure and use it a potentiometer from a stereo. I mean, we basically built this whole kind of device, and we built 10 of them for them to put into practice. And at the time, the engineering school had also built something, it was a huge apparatus you had to strap into. It was very, large and costly. So we built these cheap alternatives to it. And again, this kind of project that I did with my students developed into me starting this thing called the Digital Craft Research Lab, which was about looking at how craft processes can be combined with new technology to solve problems that people may have. And this is something that I hadn't really thought about as an application within metalsmithing, but how do we solve? We're awesome problem solvers. That's what we do, right, on a daily basis. And so how can we basically just have people define what their problems are, and they come to us and we help them solve them. And so I built this lab that had, all this, fabrication equipment, was both new and old. We had printers that we had built from scratch. And then we had some commercial printers we started building as well. And then across the room, we had a CNC router that one of my graduate students and I had built, Chad Bridgewater. We built it from scratch, and then had a milling machine and other equipment across the hall. And Yev was really interested in us kind of like expanding the work that we were doing. She was at the time, I think, became chair at that time, and said, let's start a digital fabrication and design program. And so this was a program that was really looking at how do we partner with other entities on campus and off campus. We wrote for a lot of grants, received a lot of money to be able to develop this new course of study. I had students that engaged in this, Fred Kames, Calvin Rupnow, Becky Yokshani, and Sarah Schuler, and we started making prosthetic coverings for individuals. This was a part of a Melody America project where veterans were going through rehabilitation due to PTSD, and then also their injuries, and then learning how to play a musical instrument. And this individual approached us and said, "Hey, could you start making these, fairings that would restore the anatomical shape of the leg, but then also be some object of like desire, like it would look cool, And so we started working on projects like that. There's some details of that. So about this time, I received a message from the Milwaukee Makerspace saying, hey, there's an individual who's looking for a hand for their daughter who was born with a limb difference. And so basically this individual asked me, can you help my daughter out? Can you make a 3D printed hand for her? And I thought, well, this is right up our alley. I was going on sabbatical at the time, and I felt like I could really have a lot of time to work on this and put toward it. And one of my colleagues I talked to, she was in graphic design, Adrienne Blair. She was a close friend of my family's, and we always get together with our kids. And so Adrienne said, I said, will you help me out with this? And she said, yeah, I will. And so, and again, Adrienne had a huge impact on me in the fact that her center of her design kind of process was empathy, looking at how, we think about our user and how, we can be empathetic to individuals. And Shay's mother, Renee, had seen this project. It was called RoboHand. Richard Van Az was a South African carpenter who had cut off some of his fingers. And so he had developed this hand with the help of an individual named Ivan Owen, who built these kind of like cosplay and like theatrical objects. And so the two of them had worked, and MakerBot had actually done a video on them making a partially 3D printed and thermoplastic hand. And this video had kind of gone viral, and I had seen it, and I had told my students probably a couple semesters before, like, this is the type of work we should be doing in like our, in our program. Like, we should be doing things that have an impact on people. And so I kind of had to practice what I preach. And I said, okay, let's do this for Shay. And so we had made molds of her hand, and then we started making these like customized objects and really developed a relationship with Shay and her family. And I just kind of devoted time to like coming up with new ideas. How can we make these devices better? How can we make a fully 3D printed device? There were a couple other individuals at universities that were also working on this. Jorge Zaninga was one. So we were basically working on all these different ideas of how do we make a fully 3D printed prosthetic that could be given to anyone. You don't need thermoplastic. We could just we could scale it, size it differently. It doesn't need to be, we don't have to worry about the issues of like hardware and things like that. Can we 3D print all the components? And so I would receive these drawings that I would take off of Shay's hand and then impose them into or transpose them into Rhino and be able to like model these hands. And so we made Shay her first hand, and she came to the lab, the Digital Craft Research Lab, and she was able to immediately put this on and use it. And one of the things we started to like talk to Shay about is like, can you help be like a co-designer on this? Can you tell us what works? What doesn't work? What's uncomfortable? And, we're also then working in conjunction with her, like prostheticists, and like, how do we develop this into something that's like really, really helpful? And now in Shay's case, she had been encouraged as a kid to, just go about life as normal. So the place where she really used the hand a lot was in clamping things, holding something down like a potato to peel it, or, be able to grab something maybe she couldn't have grabbed before, but also swimming. I mean, you didn't think about like being able to tread water and like move through the water. It became a useful object in that way also. And my family, again, at this time, I had spent a lot of time away from family. My schedule at Milwaukee was kind of intense. And so while I was on sabbatical, it was an opportunity for my family to participate. And a huge thank you and shout out to my wife, Jill. I could not have done anything that I've ever done in my life without her. And my kids, again, them being able to participate in this and actually engage in making as well. It was like, wow, this is really cool. This is like, it's like a completely different project. It makes me think of the panel from earlier today and about, mothers that are thinking about how they work within our professional field and then also be able to balance a life, with children. And so here's a video that videographer team made. I'm going to play for you.
Frankie, is there meant to be sound in this video? Oh no, I'm not hearing your sound at all right now.
Sorry, let me stop share for a second. I think I forgot to click that.
Yeah, click the little button.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all good.
Let's try this again.
Okay,
got it now?
Slide your hand through that. Okay. Perfect. Can you grab my hand with it or not? Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Do it one more time. Ah, cool. I said, I've got to do something because this is, I can help. So you want to try it out or not? Yeah? Okay.
I saw all those videos of kids picking up stuff and I thought it'd be cool.
That's good.
I tell all of my students that we can change the world. We can do something important. We can do something impactful. And they come in and they're just ready to jump in and try something new. And
Shay and her class have come and visited our class, and we get to talk to her and interact with her, and it's really cool to see her put on the hands that we've designed and use them and really like react to that.
What I really want to do is to streamline everything and make it so it's actually the same size as her other hand. So it feels like it fits. It's a functional part of her body.
I knew that they would come up with better ideas than I could come up with, because that's what our young people and our students do here at UWM. They come up with ideas that are grand, and that brings a richness to the project that I can't, I'm too old in some ways to do that, to have a fresh perspective.
none of the students have ever 3D printed, none. And so that entire production process is different. None of them have ever used a foam cutter. So it's a really fun thing to see them all out of their element, but willing to work together and help each other.
There's a Google Plus community called Enable, and Enable is a group of right now about 400 members. So I can talk to people from around the world. I can download the files for it.
We had our students join Enable, and almost immediately people who I would be intimidated to talk to at first, would chime in on their sketches and their ideas. And the students, you could just see they came in and they were proud of the fact that they were part of this. And I think that that's really empowering.
I think that just that rapid pace at which we can develop and research, it's wonderful, it's marvelous. Pull them out and stick them on the finger that you want them.
I don't think there's a lot of other kids out there who can say that they get to be a part of making their own hand and give feedback and can have choices. Just seeing her joy. As a mom, that's all you want, is your kids to be happy.
Have you ever seen the laser cutter work? It's pretty fun.
They're the ones that can sit here and spend hours and hours and hours away from their family working on stuff. It's just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So leaves us speechless.
Is that too tight? Are you okay? Is it okay? Okay.
Yes, Frankie and I are giving them these hands, and sort of we're gifting them with our work, but I think in a real way, they are giving us the bigger gift. This is the type of opportunity that lets you re-fall in love with a discipline. Would that be cool? Put little charms in there.
There's so much more we can do. There's so many more problems to solve. Being here and being able to engage with our students to do that, that's the greatest job in the world,
All right, so let's see if we can move forward now. There we go. So we continued to develop ideas. I started working a lot on gauntlet design, this kind of back section of the hands, and trying to develop more comfortable designs. Shay's class came to our studio, and we had kids that were raising their hands saying, I want a hand, and they didn't need a hand. They had two functioning hands, and we realized that something was happening here, that what some people would see as different now is like something that everybody else wanted, and it was really touching in a lot of ways, where I started to realize that, wow, like we as designers, as craftspeople, we have the ability to create things that are useful, and we can do it for one person, and that can have an effect. I think throughout the conference, people have spoken about how one person can affect change, and it was a real eye opener. I think I really hadn't thought about my profession in that way up until that point, and it was due in large part to my colleague Adrienne Blair. Like I said earlier, Adrienne she passed away a couple years ago, and so I'd like to dedicate this talk to her because she taught me that. Sorry. So the group of Enable grew, and it became a global community. People were participating in the design and building, but also people were asking from all over the world for hands. And again, there were just a few designers that were working on this. I would receive, actually, this was from a little girl in Inverness, Scotland, and I received this package with that drawing and then this little pink plaster cast. And this is Haley.
Hi, I'm David Fraser. I'm from Inverness. This is my daughter Haley, who's 5. She was born with brachydactyly on her left hand. Haley was born with little stumps on her left hand instead of full-grown fingers. Earlier on this year, I got in touch with a chap called Frankie from the University of Wisconsin in the United States of America, and he kindly made a 3D printed hand for Haley, free of charge. As Haley was born with her small hand, it's never ever stopped her doing day-to-day tasks. However, with her new prosthetic hand, she can pick up heavier objects such as fruit or teddies, and it also can give her counterbalance when she's riding her scooter. Before Haley got her hand, her options to her were to have a toe removed from one of her feet and put on as a finger on her left hand so she can have a pinching action. However, it wasn't an option to us to put her through that as she was so young at the time. So now we've looked into helping other children in the United Kingdom, and we're also working with Haley's plastic surgeon to get these hands built over here for children in the UK.
So Haley was the first child to receive a 3D printed hand in the UK, and again, word started to travel. BBC did a report on this, and again, David Fraser was really instrumental in getting the word out and trying to get these hands shared with that community. And so, again, it was amazing to see this community grow as a result of just giving something away for free. And so I also had received word. I was on a Google meetup, as I would frequently get on these with the other designers, like were 2 or 3 other designers I would get on with, and we would talk about ideas, but then occasionally we'd have people that would ask about, receiving a hand, parents. And so I wound up speaking with this individual, and she found out she was actually just about 20 to 30 miles down the road from me. She had just adopted this little boy named Karuna from India. And Karuna in India, a birth defect or, this affected hand would have just kind of been in some ways a death sentence. And so, nobody wanted him. And so he was adopted and, came to the States. And because he had not used his hand, atrophy had set in. And so he didn't have very much strength in his hand initially. But we found that just the movement of this hand started to kind of strengthen, because you had to be able to have about 15 degrees of movement to be able to actuate the hand. And so it started to strengthen the hand. Here's Bella. So we continue to help other kids. Bella was one of the youngest that we helped. And then Evan was the first child that actually had an accident, an amputation due to that accident.
No.
You tricked her. Mm-hmm.
Drop it, Ellie. Ready?
Mm-hmm. Good one. You're getting better.
So it was great working with Evan, because he would put things through their paces, and we could test things and see how things might break. I started to engage more and more with collaborative handwork, where we're designing hands with Andreas Bastian, Peter Binkley, Ivan Owen. And eventually we decided to, have a team led by Jeremy Simon that would build the official Enable hand. It's the organization that I was a member of. And so I was tasked with making the 3D printable hinge pins, so we weren't having to use hardware from the hardware store, but that we were thinking about globally, that we could, if you could print everything on the printer, that would be very, very helpful. So I worked on the gauntlet and the tensioning device and those hinge pins. Ivan worked on the fingers and Peter on the palm. And then Andreas kind of worked with bringing everything together with us. And we developed this Raptor hand, and we were asked to come to the Johns Hopkins conference on 3D printed prosthetics. And we sent this design out into the world for free and said, basically, everyone scale this hand at varying levels of size, and then print them and send them to Johns Hopkins. And basically we'd have an event where we would talk about the research that we were doing. This was organized by Dr. Albert Chi, and we could present the work that we were doing, and then be able to then have a hand building event where I basically use my camera on my computer to show families of children who had limb differences how to build their own hand. And our hope was, because we were getting so many requests for hands, that if we could start to train these groups of people within their communities, they could share with their network of people who also had children that were born with no fingers. And so this was a fabulous event. I took my student Kayvon here, shown here, and we basically had a room full of families that were building these hands, and the children got to participate in making their own devices. We were able to size them kind of like you would at a shoe store, and then give them a package of parts that they could then put together and build. And it was an amazing event. You could see the joy on their faces. And this was also the first time where this community, which had met up until this time just through Google Hangouts. And keep in mind, this is about 2012. So this is before, all this kind of video stuff that we've been doing lately in this last year. And so we all got to connect for the first time as a group. And so it was prosthetists, doctors, designers, people of all different types and backgrounds. And we got to meet for the first time. And we continue to do these hand building workshops. I would do these at Milwaukee. I would get together with local high schools and invite them in to be able to participate in building hands. We could then ship those hands to people in need. I would travel to other local high schools and grade schools to be able to share this. And then, even as into other universities. So that here it was in Florida here doing a hand printing event or a hand building event that was sponsored by Microsoft. And again, it was great to see people participating in these devices being made for people in need. We continue to make adaptive devices, and as Shay grew, she wanted to be able to play viola. So we made a bowl holder for her. And again, it was an opportunity to kind of develop these devices. And so, oops, I ran that too fast. But anyway, I know I'm running on time here anyway. So also, I just do that. So well, we'll go ahead forward. So we would adapt this and make adjustments to it as Shay needed. And then one of my graduate students, Caitlin Driver, she developed an adaptive trumpet device for Karuna when he learned to play trumpet. And so made a device that he could keep on his trumpet in its case, and we could store it. And then he was able to use this at school.
Then it's a dovetail on that. You slide together. Excellent. Yeah, then you can hold it up to position.
So recently, I just finished up a body of work. These are high-touch models for a prominent museum. I'm not able to disclose everything right now, but there's a museum that's being remodeled that's going to have some scale models of airplanes. These airplanes are CNC machined and then welded and fabricated so that viewers can come to the museum and touch these objects so they can actually sense what the design is. So visually impaired individuals could approach these, and again, they're meant to be interacted with as objects that will kind of help describe the actual plane that's on display, if that makes sense. And so again, I'm just astonished at the ways in which I've been blessed to be able to use my abilities and my skills and the things that I've learned and the influences I've had from my mentors, my students, my family, and how it's allowed me to find communities that I can, again, use those skills to engage with. So thank you so much. If you've got questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. So I'll stop my share here.
That was truly inspirational. I'm not seeing a lot of action in the questions right now, mostly because everyone's just posting that they're crying. I think myself, I got a little misty, as did you. So we're all crying here right now, guys, which is really great. What a moving presentation. I'm just so, inspired by like the interdisciplinary approach to practice, like through this project and through your history as a maker, and like this open source kind of adaptive technology is just so amazing. You mentioned in the beginning that like function was one of the things that attracted you or kind of motivated you around jewelry. What do you think that this whole process has taught you about function, or kind of changed the way that you think about that?
Well, I think that's the fact that, we engage with objects on a daily basis. We all do. Everyone does. Not just metalsmiths. Everyone does. And it's made me very aware that the impact that those objects can have on other individuals. And again, just the fact that making a singular piece of jewelry for one individual, like it can have an intense amount of meaning and depth, way beyond what we initially think as makers. I think we just need to be really aware of that there's power in that. There's power in making, there's power in objects, and really the objects become the conduit. They become the conduit for relationships between people. This has been a little bit different talk for me, in the fact that normally, I spend more time talking about individual pieces and, where the thought process came behind it. But really today, I thought that my intent was really to think about how we've all had people in our lives that have kind of been these markers. And I think to especially in my case, I wish I had said thank you more often, and to be grateful in the moment. And so, yeah. And I think making for other people is a great way to show appreciation too, so yeah, that's what it's taught me, I think.
I love that. We have a question from the audience. First of all, when do you sleep? And second of all, singing your praises, saying that you're amazing, and asking if people can still get involved in printing hands for other people.
Yeah, people absolutely can get involved. Enable still exists. I think the Google format, Hangout format has been dropped, but you can still get involved with Enable. I think it's enablingthefuture.org, I think. I can share those links later on too, but yeah, you can definitely get involved, and there's definitely a need for, I think, people that know how to design. That was in the beginning. I think that was really the struggle, was people that had the computer skills to be able to model, 3D model, and do things like that. So that's still definitely something that people can participate in and are. So yeah.
Awesome. We have a question from Lauren, wondering if you have had to eventually navigate with buying and selling with these hands, or if they have stayed completely free and open source up to today.
Yeah, they've stayed completely free and open source. In the beginning, actually, it was a legal issue as well. So, because they weren't certified by prosthetists, like, individuals had to work with their individual prosthetists to make sure that this wasn't doing damage, right? And so we were very clear that this was an experimental device, and that therefore it wasn't something we were going to charge for. Plus, the cost is like under $20. And again, these aren't fully functional as far as being able to like use them in a situation where you're hanging off monkey bars or something like that. We never recommended that, obviously. Like, it was just like kind of like supplemental device, but there was more to it than just like enabling that movement. It was also what I talked about earlier about like changing a viewpoint of like the children that are engaged with these other children. It's like, it had a function that went beyond what one might think. So yeah, they're completely free. And again, there's tons of volunteers that are volunteering, even just to print, that aren't designing, but they've got printers, access to printers, and they're printing for kids.
That's so amazing. What's the current sort of status of this project, and what is next for this and for you?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I relocated to Appalachian State University, and I started building a studio here. And this project has kind of morphed. In my current role here, I teach jewelry and metalsmithing, and I would say that it's not as broad as what my opportunities were in Milwaukee. Plus, I think being an urban institution in Milwaukee, I had a lot larger network. So I just made that transition a few years ago here. So I kind of took a break from that to develop my studio. But there are many things that are on the horizon. I've actually got a couple projects that. One that I've started teaching workshops out of my own studio here during summers for professionals. So Sharon Massey recently, a couple summers ago, took a workshop here, and Laura Wood. So I'm really interested in sharing, again, the things that I do and the things that I teach with other professionals, and have that professional interaction. For me, not having graduate students here has kind of been a loss for me in a lot of ways. And so this kind of replaces that, an opportunity to hang out with like really cool people that like are in my field. And it's an opportunity to share ideas. And so that's very fulfilling. And then a new project I'm getting ready to release is kind of a sustainable or self-sustainable craft website, where I'll have, I've got an open source CNC cuttable jeweler's bench that I'll be releasing out for anyone who has access to a CNC router. They could download the plans for the bench, cut it. And then this comes out of an interest where I see it very important in my role as a professor to make sure my students go out into the world and are prepared. And I think about how my father would help me with equipment and tools, and how that's probably one of the hardest things to do, is to develop your studio after you graduate. You have no access, you have no community. And so to be able to know that you're going to be okay, that you're going to be able to like afford to continue to create. That's something that's really near and dear to my heart. So I'm looking forward to launching that. And so look for that coming out soon, hopefully, and people can download their free plans for a jeweler's bench that they can CNC cut.
I'm obsessed with that idea. It's so great. Yeah, that would have been totally up my alley when I finished, but such an important point that you raised, because you spend all this time being surrounded by, pretty unbridled access to equipment that you're certainly not going to be able to afford, and thinking about creative ways to stack the deck in your favor. We're almost coming up on time. If you have any last questions, folks, post them, but I want to give you an opportunity, Frankie, to leave us with some final thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again to Snag, and I was incredibly inspired by numerous panelists today and the previous days. And this, I think right now we're at a time where we've all been missing our community, and I'm anxious to get back to be in person, obviously, but this has been a fabulous opportunity, and I'm so glad that Snag is kind of back, and we're starting to connect again. And I hope we can continue this conversation both virtually and beyond in person in the future. So thanks again.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm being pushed by the audience to ask you and back up on when do you sleep?
Well, keep in mind, this is a span of a lot of years, right? Like I've like I said, I mentioned earlier, I've been this is about 20 years, so I have time to sleep. It's all good.
Amazing. I'm glad to hear that you're practicing self-care while doing so much for the community that you are supporting. That's very good to know. Thank you so much, Frankie, for such an inspirational talk. We are being showered with love from the audience for you right now and the work that you've been doing. Thank you so much for sharing this story and this journey with us to close out the program this evening on our main stage. That is coming to the end for us, folks. It is getting late, and we are heading into closing remarks before we move over to our virtual gallery crawl. I should be able to say virtual by this point, but apparently that's much harder than it sounds. I just want to say that I have been so invigorated, to echo Frankie's comments by this kind of gathering and this community, and just by all of the explorative practices and kind of new modes of thinking, different ways of working that have been surfaced throughout the last couple of days. Not only that, I'm extremely honored to have had this opportunity to be part of the very first virtual Snag convening and connect with this community. As we've all kind of heard, this through line of this whole event has really been about community. And I think it's so important for us, even while we're still being mediated by the screen and may continue to be so for another little while. I hope through this virtual convening that you felt connected to one another and to this community and building new community, and have been excited by the access to some of the kind of worldwide or speakers that have been able to come to you on this virtual stage over the past 3 days. It's been an absolute pleasure to be your moderator. I'm going to